For the better of 2 weeks, we've been hearing that neither Israel nor Hamas want a prolonged fight. So why is a tenuous ceasefire in tatters? With rockets fired on Israel, army reservists recalled, and some 24 Palestinians killed, including the wife and child of Hamas's most senior military commander. Is it back to square one? Or if neither side wants a deal, could it get much, much worse? Both sides may be war-weary, but it seems there also has to be little appetite for compromise between an Israel that doesn't want to loosen its blockade of Gaza and a Hamas that doesn't want to disarm. Then there's the rivalry among potential mediators, with the United States now steering clear. Egypt's been brokering truce talks while continuing to show its distaste for a Hamas movement that's an offshoot of the now banned Muslim Brotherhood. Cairo also wary of Qatar, home to exiled Hamas leader Khaled Mashal. Doha, where Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas was expected this Wednesday. Today, in the France 24 debate, we're asking if it is indeed back to square one. With us to talk about it, Gil Mahali, columnist for Israeli daily newspaper Yediot Aharonot. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening.
Welcome back from Greenland, Switzerland. He joins us today. Attorney John Whitbeck, former advisor to Palestinian negotiating teams. Thank you for being with us. And from London, Mattia Toaldo of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to the show. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24Debate. The fighting started Tuesday before the truce was officially over. Kedevan Gorgistani reports on how during this Wednesday it has continued to escalate.
Hundreds of Palestinians attended the funeral of this baby and its mother. They were among those killed in an Israeli strike overnight and were the wife and child of Hamas's military leader Mohammed Deif, a man who has been on Israel's most wanted list for years.
When I agreed for him to marry my daughter, I knew that this day would come. I'm not shocked because I was expecting this to happen.
The cross-border violence flared up again on Tuesday, just hours before a ceasefire was set to expire. Since then, Israel says it has carried out nearly 100 airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, sirens went off in southern Israel, warning of incoming rockets from Gaza. Though there were no casualties, Israeli residents have tired of running for cover.
This is not a normal way to live. I'm not hating the Palestinians. I'm not wishing them to death. I want peace with them. They had their opportunity to be with us in peaceful agreement. They don't want this. They want to occupy all Israel.
After a week of Egyptian-led diplomacy, talks between Israelis and Palestinians are at a standstill, making a lasting peace deal even harder to reach.
Gil Mahali, on both sides, we're hearing lots of people saying how weary they are. They were just getting used to the fact that the fighting was over. Our correspondent in Jerusalem was saying that a short while ago. Weary, but are you surprised that the truce collapsed?
Yes. I was surprised because the last 24 hours before this breach of the ceasefire, all information that came from Cairo and from Israel was more or less optimistic. The ceasefire was prolonged 24 hours. The reason invoked was that an agreement was negotiated, and now it needs time for governments and different decision makers to study it and to give their green light or red light. And there was even talk in Israel of the arrival of John Kerry to the region in order to finalize the agreement. So I was quite surprised that so early, 3 in the afternoon, Palestinians chose to turn over the table and fire again. The first Israeli reaction was quite moderate. They retaliate into open space around an hour later, and the escalation then went on during the evening and until the assassination attempt against the
leader of the Qassam brigades.
brigades.
How do you explain what happened?
Well, I think that we are really in the negotiation. They are really reaching the most difficult points, and we speak of Israel, we speak of Hamas, we speak of Egypt and the Palestinian Authority, but I think that Hamas has more than one head. There is Hamas in Qatar, which means that there are also the Qatari interests. There is Hamas in Turkey, there is Hamas inside Gaza, and inside Gaza there is a political Hamas, and there is military Hamas. And I think that they are not able to reach a consensus. So what's happening is we are hearing from the Egyptians and from the Palestinian Authority that things evolve. We are hearing that they are trying to push forward an agreement and to pressure those members of Hamas who are against it to move on, and then things fall apart. I don't think, though, that we are back to square one. I think that 45 days of violence do have significant sense, meaning, and that we are not in square one. That I think that a solution will be found, and unfortunately, more violence. The Palestinians thought that it needs more violence until a compromise will be concluded.
All right, John Whitbeck, do you agree, and do you share the surprise that Gil has expressed at the breakdown of those truce talks?
No, I don't share the surprise. I think it's pretty clear that on both sides there is felt a compelling need to achieve something from all of the suffering, the death and destruction which has occurred in the last 5 or 6 weeks. You know, on the Palestinian side, that's 2,000 dead, 10,000 injured, massive death and destruction. On the Israeli side, 64 soldiers killed, which by Israeli standards is a lot, and 2 civilians killed. And there's also a compelling need not to be seen by one's own people as having conceded, in effect, failure or defeat. So to me, this is logical also because I think from the Israeli point of view, the best thing they can hope for realistically at this point is to have another period of calm without agreeing to anything with the Palestinians. And Israel has proven that it has an extraordinary, well-honed capacity for negotiating simply for the sake of negotiating without really intending to come to an agreement, because usually, if not always, that is the best possible result from the Israeli point of view.
Mattia Toaldo, do you agree with John Whitbeck that the idea for the Israelis was just to drag on the negotiations?
I think the Israelis have to choose whether they want negotiations and what they want from negotiations, actually, or whether they're capable of militarily defeating Hamas. I think the idea was to build enough military strength in order to strike a good deal at the negotiation table. But the problem was the Egyptian mediation didn't work. It was not enough to bridge the gaps. And so now you would either need a third party to negotiate between the two parties, or a concert of different parties within the region, which will include also regional powers closer to Hamas. And I don't know whether the Israeli government is comfortable with that. But my question is, what is victory for the Israeli government in negotiations? Are they aiming at Hamas complete disarmament through ceasefire negotiations? I don't see that as something that can be attained. Are they aiming to achieve some kind of arms control agreement? In other words, no more arms entering the Gaza Strip, no more potential for outbreaks of violence like this? That's easier to achieve.
So from what I'm hearing from all three of you, there's something positive, which is we're not just talking about a cessation of hostilities. We're talking about more something more substantive, and something very pessimistic, which is there's such stark disagreement on what that more is. I'll begin with you, Gil Mihaly, on this point. First of all, do you take the point that for the Israelis the status quo is okay, and that what John Whitbeck said, that you keep on negotiating for a long time?
Well, the only problem with that is that even if it was true, it's clear that if we count back from Israel's retreat from Gaza in 2005, there was a crisis in June, July 2006, and then there was the war of December 2008 and January 2009, and then there was another one in November 2012, and another one that broke last July. So I think that in Israel, a status quo was not really an option, and the idea was that because the blockade over Gaza is a mean, it's not the end. The end was to try and to force Hamas to give away what is, for the moment, it's the core of its identity and its raison d'être, which means the armed struggle against Israel, what the PLO and Fatah renounced in Oslo, and what Hamas refuses to renounce, because if it does, there's no difference between them and the other Palestinians. So we are dealing here with, and actually,
So
this
the
is
aim. So you're saying
this is the big deal.
You're saying the aim was for the Israelis going into this?
No,
to
Israel
twist
did. No, I don't think that Netanyahu wanted this war. He would have preferred to continue as before, and he was dragged into it reluctantly. I think he was dragged into an ambush, a strategic ambush by Hamas.
Okay, but once he was in the ambush.
Once he was in the ambush, I think well, once you're in the you don't know what's the end of the game.
They were saying it was the destruction of the tunnels.
Yes, but they discovered that during the war there was a short example in the past, which was the 2 weeks of November 2012, and there was a long example in the past, and they didn't know whether this time it's another skirmish or it's another war. And the more you pay, the more you expect at the end. And I think that now everyone understands that going back to June 2014 is not an option. So I say again, the big Israeli deal, the big deal that Israel would expect is that Hamas renounces war as a means to arrive to a solution of the Palestinian problem, just like the others did in '93, and Israel will pay for that in accepting most of what Hamas wants today, which is in so many ways ending the blockade, having sea access, having aerial access, and having more control over the borders. But Israel could not accept that as long as Hamas stays Hamas.
John Whitbeck, it seems as though it's intractable.
Well, I think you need something, a game changer, to get out of this intractable position. Having tried to think of one, the one that I would suggest and have suggested to the Palestinian leadership, which hasn't yet chosen to act upon my suggestion, is to call publicly for UN, US, or NATO troops to be stationed both in Gaza and the West Bank to protect both Israelis and Palestinians from further violence until such time as Israel withdraws to its internationally recognized borders and ends the occupation. In a sense, this would save some face for Israel, whose declared objective of total demilitarization without an agreement to end the occupation is, as I think the other guests understand as well, totally unrealistic. So this has a problem of saving face for Israel, And to the extent that having Israel's citizens in Sderot and elsewhere protected by international forces from any possible risk of further violence would permit the Israeli government, if it were perhaps a little bit more enlightened than it seems most days, to say that they've actually succeeded with this war.
Mattia Toaldo, do you see that as being tenable, the suggestion of John Whitbeck?
I think the problem here is, as Gil was saying, is that you're never going to go back to the status quo in June. You're never going to go back in a situation where you have quiet for quiet, because that hasn't delivered Hamas anything significant. Neither has it delivered to the people of Gaza anything significant. So basically there are two options: either all-out war, in which Israel convinces by force Hamas to relinquish its armed forces. But this is quite difficult, and it's quite costly for Israel. And it would imply also a strategy to win hearts and minds among the civilian population in Gaza, which is totally missing at the moment. The other option is a political option. And I think more than thinking about an international force, which I don't see on the cards here in Europe, the solution to the negotiation talks was to focus on border security. And Europe has made an offer to the parties in this sense, that they could take some responsibility of border control, which would mean opening Gaza to the world and also guaranteeing Israel about control of arms flows into Gaza. I think if there is a solution, it comes through this kind of proposals, which of course imply addressing some final status issues, some political issues, and ultimately guaranteeing Palestinians some kind of sovereignty.
But can both sides do it while saving face?
That's the problem. You need to have an agreement that guarantees both sides claim to victory. And on the Israeli side, anything that leads to more quiet is a victory, but maybe not as much as Netanyahu has stated publicly, and probably has set the bar too high, saying that he wants demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. On the Palestinian side, anything that breaks the blockade, anything that leads to some kind of peaceful future is victory.
When we come back, we'll pick up on these points. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.